Good afternoon, everyone. I believe we already be in live stream. Thank you very much for UNITAR for arranging this session. And I think we can begin with the introduction.
That means I have the floor?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm Thomas Stelzer. I'm the Dean and Executive Secretary of the International Anti-Corruption Academy. I will be the moderator of session 7 of SDGs Learning, Training and Practice special event on accelerating resilient recovery, role of infrastructure sector and entrepreneurship. I'm meeting you from New York, where I'm this week for the Head of a Policy Forum, discussing implementation of the SDGs. Of course, in a media session like this virtual session, the role of the moderator is limited because with limited eye contact, so we'll rely very much on the technical support here that will have a smooth session here. The discussion today will focus on such vital sustainable development goals as Goal 8, inclusive economic growth, Goal 9, resilient infrastructure, inclusive and sustainable industrialization and innovation, Goal 11, safe, inclusive and resilient cities and human settlements, Goal 16, peace, justice and strong institutions, and Goal 17, global partnership for sustainable development. I'm very glad that this event has been developed in close collaboration between UN Habitat, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, think tank Outdoor Contacts, and the International Anti-Corruption Academy. I think that's a great team. Our aim today is twofold. You will be acquainted with the unique global initiative of SDG cities, as well as preventive and corrective tools to address corruption risks in post-COVID cities. We will also discuss issues related to social, inclusive and sustainable infrastructure. For this, real-life examples will be introduced. In the second part, you will also learn about the innovative group of urban entrepreneurs who will share examples of resilient entrepreneurship, social impact, and community mobilization in reference to the SDG initiative on lockdown economy. I hope these exciting and thought-provoking topics will ignite your curiosity. You will also have the opportunity to ask questions. Please submit your questions in the Q&A field in Zoom, and we will allocate 10 minutes after the presentation at the roundtable to answer selected questions. The lectures on the role of infrastructure sector in building resilient SDG cities will be delivered by the subject matter experts representing UN Habitat and IACA. A few words about these organizations. UN Habitat and IACA share objectives in relation to the promotion of sustainable development and combating corruption. While each organization has its specific focus, they converge on quite a number of areas. Both UN Habitat and IACA actively contribute to the implementation of the SDGs. UN Habitat focusing on Goal 11, IACA on implementing Goal 16, but also pointing to the fact that if corruption is not properly addressed, the implementation of the entire 2030 agenda will not be possible. As UN Habitat's primary focus is on urban development, their global flagship initiative, SDG Cities, promotes collaborative action to unleash the potential of cities to accelerate sustainable development and improve quality of life for all. IACA, as the only international organization with a mandate focused solely on the comprehensive fight against corruption, provides technical assistance, education, training, and research to build resilient anti-corruption systems. Moreover, by supporting the Global Anti-Corruption Cities Network, IACA provides assistance to cities and local governments to enhance their ability to mitigate corruption effectively and efficiently, thus creating necessary conditions for economic prosperity, implementation of development agenda, and the realization of human rights. By aligning our efforts, UN Habitat and IACA together strive to create inclusive, resilient, and corruption-free cities and human settlements that contribute to achieving the SDGs and improving the well-being of all individuals. Now comes the first section of the event, which will focus on transparency and accountability, specifically in the infrastructure sector, outlining tools for SDG alignment and examining mechanisms for anti-corruption. Our first speaker today is Stifford Aubrey, lead of SDG cities from UN Habitat. Ms. Aubrey is an interregional advisor at UN Habitat and the program manager for the SDG cities global flagship initiative based in the headquarters in Nairobi, Kenya. Ms. Aubrey will discuss how SDG cities global initiative and its innovative diagnostic tools catalyze the potential of cities to localize their sustainable development goals by harnessing local data to inform strategic plans, strengthen local institutes, and drive investments. Please, Ms. Aubrey.
Thank you very much, Professor, and thank you very much to the organizers of this event, and it's a pleasure to be joining you today. I'll talk briefly. I believe I have 8 minutes to talk about SDG cities, and I hope that you can see my screen. I've just shared the screen. So SDG Cities is a global initiative, as was introduced, and it's an effort that we have to really try and support cities to catalyze and accelerate their experience and their achievement of the SDGs. And we are working then with a theory of change that includes data, the need for cities to have good data to inform action. That data then informs a strategic planning process. Cities need to have a vision for 2030. That vision needs to be one that is not just the vision of the city leadership, but the vision of the stakeholders and communities in that city. That strategic planning then leads to looking at the enabling environment, the spatial planning, the regulations of the city, how the city is equipped to deliver on the SDGs. And of course, it naturally leads to project development, and those projects need financing. Usually to accelerate the achievement of SDGs, there's a need now to move beyond just the tax base, the revenue base that cities have, but to incorporate other actors. And this is why, particularly the private sector and others that can invest in cities. And this is why this topic of anti-corruption is so important. We need investment at the local level, but we need that to make sure that that is done in a transparent, accountable way. And of course, projects then need financing. And when those projects are financed and implemented, we can expect impact. Alongside this then is the importance that institutions are strengthened, local institutions in terms of the governance, the planning capacity, the municipal finance and revenue systems, and the service delivery. Essentially, according to the New Urban Agenda, governance, planning, finance, and effective service delivery are at the core of cities being able to drive strategic, to drive sustainable development. So in a typical process, with cities are onboarded, they commit to putting SDGs up front. They commit also to engaging communities and stakeholders in that process and to being accountable. So that onboarding process automatically then starts to talk about accountability up front and that engagement to the citizens and the residents of the city. Then the second track then looks at data and strategic planning. We do really encourage not just statistical data, but spatial data, so the city understands the differences from one community to another and understands where they need to focus investment to drive change. And we encourage citizen data so that youth groups and other people in the community can start collecting data, because when people are engaged in that data collection, they also have the expectation of knowing what is the city doing with that data and how is that data informing a strategic planning process. And they naturally then get engaged in that strategic planning process, so they're part of that accountability system in terms of defining priorities and actually seeing them achieved. And then we look then at the plans, regulations, the enabling environments, and particularly the institutional effectiveness, and eventually then in investment. As well as talking about the importance of data to inform action, and to be able to measure change and to provide that accountability towards residents and users of the city. I'm going to focus also then on what we're doing to build capacities. So cities, as mentioned, need to have good planning capacities, good plans, actually deliver successful cities in terms of both the economy, in terms of environment and society. They need effective governance that is accountable, that is listening to people and taking on the views of the diverse stakeholders and communities within the city. Cities need effective finance systems, not just good revenue systems, but good public financial accountability systems, public financial management systems, and also they need to start attracting investment as well. So having good governance is key to having good finance. And then eventually cities need to be able to deliver infrastructure and services effectively. So what we've done, we aim to work with 1,000 cities. And to do that, we have developed digital diagnostic tools. So instead of flying people here, there, and everywhere, we've created diagnostic tools, digital diagnostic tools that are available to partners, that are available to cities, so they can start understanding how they're performing. So the planning tool looks at various factors of urban and territorial frameworks, the effectiveness of local authorities in terms of their planning ability and the effectiveness of their local decision-making when it comes to planning, and then also the civil society and the engagement of planning professionals in that process. The governance tool then, there's about 100 questions, but essentially they're looking at effectiveness, accountability, and inclusiveness. So the city will have a readout then. They say, how are you? They'll understand how are they performing on these key areas, and where are the gaps. So they'll be able to then receive some training and support in terms of dealing with those gaps. And of course, as many cities are onboarded, we can group cities around these capacity gaps and train communities of learning, several cities that have a particular challenge. The mobility tool is an example of one of the basic services delivery tool. We also have a waste management tool. We also have we're building a water utilities tool at the moment. But then again, this looks at the effectiveness of the urban basic services. And lastly, we also have the rapid own source revenue tool, which basically looks at how is the revenue of the city, what is the optimum revenue of this city based on legislation, population and economy, and how is it performing, and helps them to identify what are the gaps in revenue collection. We will be building another tool then on assessing the effectiveness of the public financial management system. And often cities, they're afraid to engage with a lot of these processes, particularly of investment, because sometimes the systems that are required at the national level they don't have the capacity to deliver on these, and so they might shy away because they might think, oh, if I do a mistake, I'll be accused of corruption and these kind of things. And this capacity building actually empowers cities to actually deliver, and to deliver in accordance with the principles of accountability and transparency. And the last track then is around investment. And as cities build effective governance, accountability, good public financial management, they are also more attractive as cities to invest in. So all these things go hand in hand. And that emphasis, as mentioned by the Dean at the start, on anti-corruption, if we can get that right, then that unlocks investment, that unlocks change. And it's absolutely key that we do that. And I think then the diagnostic systems and the training that we provide to cities helps them to get that on the right track to delivering in an accountable way and attract investment. Just one last point to make then is, as we move to scale, we introduce a certification for each of these key stages. And there is discussion now on whether the certification on that governance and institutional development can be done in such a way that can help to cities show that they are accountable and that they could be accountable to investors and other partners that engage with them. So that's also a conversation that's taking place at the moment. I'll leave it there, and many thanks for this opportunity. Back to you. I think your microphone is off, Dean.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Aubrey, for this most interesting presentation. Considering how many people are living in cities and how many more will be living in cities, of course, that's very relevant. Having been living in a city which again and again has been selected the most livable city in the world, I can testify that all your indicators really impact on the well-being of citizens. So thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Dieter Zinnbauer. He will represent IACA. For 25 years, Mr. Zinnbauer has been working on governance, urbanization, and technology issues for various IGOs, NGOs, think tanks, and academic institutions. He holds a PhD from the London School of Economics and is currently a research fellow at the Copenhagen Business School. Mr. Zinnbauer will talk about the urban governance in a post-COVID city, with special emphasis on preventive and corrective tools to address corruption risks. He will focus on the role of urban land, real estate, urban planning, and outline-related integrity challenges. He will also suggest interventions to deal with corruption risks and to make cities live up to their potential. Mr. Zinnbauer, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thanks so much for having me. We are approaching, I think, 100 participants, so it's a real privilege to share some ideas with this very distinguished audience. And despite the very nice Austrian background provided by IACA, I'm actually coming to you today from Valencia, Spain, another very livable city where I'm on a work assignment, unfortunately not on holidays. So I'm going to use my 8 minutes to really briefly share one idea with you and talk about one aspect that I believe is absolutely critical to the achievement of SDGs in the urban context. And this is about urban property, urban real estate, urban land. And to get the governance of urban property right, I think is imperative to the achievement of the SDGs in urban development. And I'm trying to make this case and then leave you with like one inspiring, hopefully inspiring example of how we can start responding to that challenge. Now, why is urban land and property so important for the achievement of the SDGs? Well, to set the stage, it's quite helpful to remind ourselves of the backdrop. So when you look at urban land and real estate, it is the biggest store of global value. It's the biggest asset class in the world. It is worth more than the combined value of all stocks, bonds, and shares taken together. It's 8 times the value of all agricultural land and forests. And 60 to 70% of all banking activity is actually related to urban property and real estate. So we're dealing with an incredibly big class of assets, class of wealth. And if the big is very cake, it naturally also attracts a lot of governance challenges. And it's very important to get the governance of that asset class right. And unfortunately, we have a lot of empirical evidence that shows us that urban property real estate is also a hotspot for integrity challenges, a hotspot for corruption. So here are 3 of the main avenues how this is taking place. So first, urban property real estate is a main currency of patronage for political machines that may operate in cities. So it provides subsidized housing for political allies. It provides real estate that can be bought or sold under price that is in public hands and then being sold off to muster political support. So it's a very important patronage resource for local governments, for city governance. It also, unfortunately, is a hotspot for money laundering. So from Nairobi to Vancouver to London to New York, we have a lot of in-depth case studies that show that urban real estate, often with the help of shell companies, undisclosed ownership, is one of the most popular asset classes for laundering money. And it also is a prime vehicle, I would argue, for personal enrichment and steering wealth into private pockets. Because if you influence urban development decisions, the build out of urban infrastructures in specific ways, you can multiply the value of urban property. And we have a lot of evidence that in a lot of urban contexts, well-connected developers in combination, in collaboration with government officials are front-running those urban planning decisions and are buying up urban real estate, urban land very cheaply, and then selling it on once the development decisions are in place, and are realizing like enormous gains with those front-running practices. So we have this asset class that is hugely important. We have a lot of corruption challenges that then also translate into concrete urban problems. So if you have those issues around money laundering, speculative investments, like by political cronies, you're facing a lot of issues around urban housing, affordable housing, tenure security. We have a lot of good empirical evidence that shows those transmission paths, how those corruption risks translate into uneven settlement patterns, stunted inclusive urban mobility, how they endanger tenure security, how they endanger urban livelihoods, and so on. So there is a tendency, a driver of the corrupted urban real estate to kind of exacerbate urban injustices on different levels, and also to hardwire unjust relationships and to hardwire corruption into the DNA, into the grid of the city. So you have developments that are driven not by inclusive development objectives and SDGs, but that are driven by private enrichment opportunities. You get uneven developments, you get infrastructure build outs that cater to a few connected interests, but not to the public at large. And you basically end up with an urban development grid that is like really hardwired, where corruption is hardwired into the grid. So given this situation, what can we realistically do about it? And I just want to leave you with one piece of the puzzle. Of course, there is no magic bullet, as always, when it comes to integrity and anti-corruption. It's a kind of a patient assembling of different bits and pieces in a specific local context. But one vector of influence that seemed to be very promising is to work with urban planners. Urban planners are a very interesting professional group. They work both on the public and private side for public administrations as well as for private developers. And they do have the technical competence to actually spot when things are going wrong. So they are the ones that can spot if a community consultation wasn't done properly, if an environmental impact assessment did not use sound methodologies and was manipulated, or if some demand forecast was tweaked in dubious ways to justify certain questionable urban development decision. So urban planners are really kind of sitting at this nexus between public-private and have the competence to potentially blow the whistle, to potentially like flag if there are any corruption issues in that urban development machinery. And one way to basically, oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why this is. So I'm very sorry. I didn't know the sound on the slide. But so one real response is like, we realized, like having done a stock take of corruption training for urban developers, and we realized there's very little there. There's nothing in the curriculum that urban planners are learning. There's nothing or very little in the professional training, follow-up training. So we designed a course for urban planners in Zambia, and a 2-day training program, and followed up in a kind of sound research ways over a 2-year period to see how successful the training was, like, and it equipped urban planners with the tools to basically resist corruption in their particular settings, be aware of the major corruption risks, and also network among each other into a group of peers, integrity peers, that can support each other and like collectively access other support networks when they face corruption risks. So of course, this is just one piece of the puzzle, and there are many others, but I think I'll leave it at that since my 8 minutes are also up. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zimbauer, and observing your time limits. It helps very much in our discussion. Our next presenter is Mr. Hamish Goldie-Scott. He's a fellow of the UK Institution of Civil Engineers and a practitioner of more collaborative approaches to corruption risk management. As a technical advisor to COST, the Infrastructure Transparency Initiative, he has an MA in engineering from the University of Cambridge, where he's a regular guest lecturer on its MPhil course on engineering for sustainable development. Mr. Goldie-Scott will talk about socially inclusive and sustainable infrastructure. He will describe how underlying drivers of corruption risks on infrastructure projects can be mapped and better understood. We'll also talk about ways how the COST initiative helps governments, the private sector, and civil society to work together to better understand and address such risks, including in challenges in urban contexts. Thank you very much. Please, you have the floor.
Great, thank you, Thomas, and thank you for this chance to be here and discuss these very important issues. I'll be talking about COST, the Infrastructure Transparency Initiative, and it's focused on public infrastructure under the banner of better lives from better infrastructure. And by better infrastructure, that means that infrastructure that is relevant to the needs of citizens, it's delivered efficiently to the required quality, and it's sustainable. And the way this is achieved through COST is through a focus on building trust. We'll hear that word a lot, trust, between stakeholders, so that the resultant decision-making is more evidence-based and characterized by effective and honest communication about concerns that may arise, professional competence and in dealing with challenges that do arise, and a shared commitment to ensuring that agreed objectives are met. The program for COST, the global program after a pilot, started in 2012, and there's now sufficient impact evidence for it to be formally endorsed by FIDIC, the International Federation of Consulting Engineers, and included in the G20 Compendium of Good Practice. But it's not always been an easy ride. It's easily misunderstood or oversimplified. So before describing it in more detail, we need to look at the context and the problem that the COST approach is trying to solve, and why the key features adopted by COST appear to have some merit. The context is that infrastructure lies at the heart of all efforts to meet the SDGs. It includes everything from health education for all to access to energy, clean water, and sanitation. As such, it plays a key role in the three different themes of development, namely economy, environment, and society. The problem is that for a host of reasons, including the large amounts of spending, infrastructure is characterized by particularly high corruption risks. If you'd asked me 30 years ago what the typical level of corruption risks are in terms of financial aspect, I'd have said perhaps about 30% of the value of any particular major project. If you ask me now, the figure is the same. And that is despite a complete transformation in the legal environment. In the 90s, most European governments offered tax incentives for their companies to pay bribes to win international contracts. Until the 90s, international bodies didn't even view corruption as being a bad thing. Now we have a climate of zero tolerance, compliance. There's been huge progress in the legal front, and yet just a few years ago, the IMF published this report, in-depth report, saying that on average, roughly 1/3 of the spending on infrastructure is wasted on inefficiency, including corruption. And one of the findings in that time is that it isn't so much that corruption undermines good governance, but that poor governance leaves the door open to corruption risks. It's a wicked problem, that's a term I've used there, in that it can't be solved by simplistic one-dimensional approaches. Because of the complex interdependencies that affect corruption, the effort to solve one aspect of the problem can reveal or create other problems. And the idea of just focusing on one aspect, saying, let's change the law, or let's catch the bad guys, that we know doesn't work. So there's been growing interest in the role played by transparency and participation. In other words, the role played by truthful discussion. Can we be real about what's happening, not try to have a veneer of compliance, but talk about the real problems, not have willful blindness. But even that is not as easy as it sounds. Participation and transparency, well, to be effective, participation requires trust between stakeholders, acting in good faith and respecting each other's area of expertise. It's not enough just to have meetings or consultation. I've seen the breakthrough that happens when the private sector and government speak honestly to each other about why they're doing what they're doing. And very often, the person involved in corruption says, I don't want to do this, but in this context, I feel I have no choice. And it's when you get to that stage that you start looking at the real issues. So that's really helpful. For transparency to be effective, it requires an appreciation that each stakeholder needs different information. And information, by the way, is not the same as data. Data, by definition, is meaningless. It has to have context to have meaning. It needs to be analyzed. But then, can you trust the people who turn it into information? We heard earlier about data informing action. Well, within cost, we unpick that a bit, and we look at the process of turning data into, well, first of making sure it's accurate, then turning it into information in a way that is trusted by all the stakeholders. But even if information is there, it isn't helpful if nobody has the capacity to make use of it. And for the accountability that arises from that to be effective, it needs a focus not just on the symptoms of inefficiency and corruption, but also on the underlying drivers. Otherwise, you hit the problem somewhere and it pops up somewhere else. It's been found helpful in this regard to view the drivers of corruption as being closely aligned with shortcomings in the drivers of good performance. And just to show what I mean by this, the drivers of good performance, and that means what I said before about better infrastructure. So it's competitive processes and quality and responsive to needs. For that, you need capacity for it to be possible and accountability to make it happen. So it's a contractor who has all the right resources and the skills and the training to do the job. And you say, if you do it, I'll pay you. If you don't, I won't. And that's the level at which most public procurement contracts take place. It more or less works, but it's very inefficient because it's missing trust. For it to flourish, you have trust, because with trust, the private sector will invest in their own capacity. And trust always saves time and always saves money. But even that's not enough if you can't enforce a contract, or if there's ultimately no reward for good performance. So if any one of these drivers is missing or weak, it becomes not a driver of performance, but of inefficiency and corruption. And this breaks down into different elements. And each of those, if it's weak, it becomes a driver of corruption. So very quickly, the 4 features of cost that use this approach are multi-stakeholder working, which has executive powers over the program, disclosure, making the data available, assurance, which is checking the accuracy of the data and turning it into compelling information without making a judgment, and social accountability is using that to hold people to account. So that's about working together, let the facts speak for themselves, to strengthen existing accountability mechanisms to improve performance. It's not duplicating efforts. So the impact of cost, the the best data, the bulk data available, suggests that the effective cost financially is a saving of about 12%. There's an example in Ghana of a city which has begun disclosing, and it's worked so well that 7 other authorities have chosen to do it. In general, there's lots of impact stories, but to be fair, some programs have been less successful than others. Some have flourished for a while and then not lasted. But the key predictor is when it becomes to be trusted by all stakeholders. And here's a picture of the mayor of Kyiv, Vitali Klitschko, speaking with the head of cost in Ukraine, and the level of trust there, because he found that cost would actually protect him because he was being more transparent. He could make decisions without being frozen into inaction by the risks in the area. More information is available on the website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hamish, for this, for referring to so many different aspects and interconnections of our comprehensive struggle against corruption. Your presentation was quite sober, but you were also pointing out how action can have impact. And I think that's very important. Thank you very much. We are now moving to the second part of the event, which will focus on resilient economic development and cooperation. UNCTAD will discuss the role of entrepreneurs in shaping urbanization and present their key findings on their report, Urban Expansion and Entrepreneur Playground. You'll be acquainted with talented urban entrepreneurs who have built their communities, advanced transparency and integrity. The panel consisting of speakers from UNCTAD, think tank Alter Contacts, Baltic, Reharvested Plus, African Geospace, Drop-E, will discuss the concept of urban entrepreneurship and its successful implementation. It will be moderated by UNCTAD and think tank Alter Contacts. Mr. Massimo Mercury, co-founder and chairman, think tank Alter Contacts, Ms. Julia Subchenko, co-founder and head of SDG Partnerships, think tank Alter Contacts, and Ms. Saria Vojta, enterprise development officer, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the introduction, Thomas. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. We will continue the conversation now, exploring how expanding urbanization changes cities and shine spotlight on entrepreneurs who are redefining urban landscapes through their ventures, reimagining urban living, and also leaving an undeniable mark on the way we experience our cities. So like Thomas mentioned, my name is Saria Vojta. I work on entrepreneurship development at UNCTAD, which is the UN body on trade and development. And I will be moderating the first part of the conversation. So we have a fantastic multidimensional panel here. We're going to hear from think tank Alter Contacts Julia Subchenko and myself on the importance on urbanpreneurs, followed by the insights on the opportunities, but also the disruptive nature of urbanization through the lens of entrepreneurs. At the end, we're going to open up the floor for the audience. So if you have a question, just drop it in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. So today, around 56% of the population lives in cities. The urbanization phenomenon is expected to continue, with most of the people set to live in urban areas by 2050. As urban populations grow, so do the demands for the infrastructure, housing, and services. Overcrowded slums and informal settlements become a harsh reality for many, with limited access to basic necessities such as clean water, healthcare, or education. The challenge of growing population also lies in providing affordable and reliable transport and energy systems, among others, while minimizing their environmental impact. However, amid these challenges, a wave of urban entrepreneurs rises to the occasion. These innovative agents of change possess a unique ability to identify urban issues as opportunities for transformation. Through their ventures, urban entrepreneurs address a wide range of city challenges. They harness technology to optimize urban services, they develop sustainable infrastructure, and improve the quality of life for city residents. Today, we see transportation startups revolutionizing mobility, social enterprises tackling affordable housing, and environmental startups promoting green solutions, just to name a few. They understand that economic growth alone is not enough. Social impact and environmental stewardship are equally vital. By championing inclusive business models, fostering community engagement, and prioritizing environmental sustainability, they pave the way for cities that thrive on inclusivity, equity, and resilience. But their journey is not without challenges. Urban entrepreneurs face numerous obstacles, such as limited resources, regulatory complexities, and also social and cultural barriers. The United Nations recognizes the importance of transformative power of urban entrepreneurs through its resolution on entrepreneurship for sustainable development of 2022, in which it highlights the significance of urbanization in fostering entrepreneurship within cities and acknowledges the vital role that small businesses play in addressing social challenges. It is key that local municipalities have a long-term entrepreneurship strategy in place that allows urban entrepreneurs to successfully project their businesses into the future and be able to invest in innovation. This, with proper talent management, the exchange of best practices, mentorship programs, and access to capital through collaborative multi-stakeholder ecosystems will help nurture ventures and scale their impact. And now I'll give the floor to Julia from Alter Contacts.
Thank you very much, Zaria, and thank you to all our panelists, both who already spoken and about to speak soon. It's really a big honor to be hosting the session all together. And to continue setting the scene, I will share a few words about our work in this field. So Alter Contacts is a global think tank for sustainable development, with more than 300 experts in 42 countries. It has a special consultative status with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. What we do is we identify institutional voids and societal problems that are not addressed. We bring attention to them and incubate possible solutions locally that can be replicated on a global scale. One of our key focus areas is empowering entrepreneurship, both at the urban and rural levels. I'm happy to share that the written statement of Think Tank Alter Contacts on the role of entrepreneurs in achieving SDGs has become part of the 2023 ECOSOC high-level segment. So if we talk about accelerating the recovery from COVID-19 and the implementation of the Agenda 2030 at all levels, then micro, small, and medium enterprises provide a truly admirable and inspiring example. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we interviewed over 350 small businesses from 40 countries, 5 continents, in 17 languages, representing 78 different economic activities, to find out how it affected their companies, their life, and their future. But more importantly, together and share the ingenious examples of what entrepreneurs did to save their businesses. Adapting fast, collaborating with others, adjusting business practices, focusing more on clients, and keeping active were some of the lessons gathered along with developing the service online. But what stood out in every story is how, disregarding their own hardships, small business owners took responsibility for others, their families, their employees, customers, and the community where they're in, helping to restore the global economy in the most sustainable way. These findings were referenced in the UN report of Secretary General on entrepreneurship for sustainable development. And it is great that one of the entrepreneurs we interviewed back then is here with us today on the panel. And all of the entrepreneurs today can share practical examples of how they actually overcame their challenges, both in urban setting and from the pandemic. So thank you again for joining our roundtable and the session. And if you're watching us live, once again, if you have questions or comments, please put it in the Q&A field, and we will try to address it and to make the session as interesting and as relevant as possible for you. And with that, I would like to give the floor back to Zaria.
Thank you, Julia. And like she said, before we begin with the roundtable, UNCTAD is first going to share some key insights from the report that is titled Urban Expansion and Entrepreneurs Playground. So I'll touch upon 3 key points. Firstly, businesses of all sizes, either startups, SMEs, or mom and pop shops, contribute to solving urban challenges and the achievement of the global goals. Success lies in creating a conducive business environment for these small businesses. But what does that look like? The right infrastructure, access to digital technologies, and therefore information, talent, and investment. A long-term entrepreneurship strategy is vital to create a conducive business environment, as it promotes stability, it attracts investment, talent, and nurtures sustainable growth, and ultimately fosters a thriving ecosystem for all businesses. But the key challenge is how to ensure that these ecosystems are inclusive, that no person is left out and there is a pulling into a new thinking. Secondly, governments can play a key role in creating connected business ecosystems. This is crucial as it enables coordination, collaboration, and the leveraging of collective resources, which leads to increased productivity, industry growth, and improved overall economic resilience. This can be done by digitalization and providing critical information and data, bringing together entrepreneurs, academic institutions, investors, and other key players. Thirdly, another key area to focus on is investment in entrepreneurial education and skills development, which is an essential but underappreciated and recognized key. By integrating entrepreneurship programs into educational institutions and providing specialized training opportunities, aspiring entrepreneurs can be equipped with the right knowledge, skills, but also mindset that is necessary to navigate the challenges of starting and scaling a business. This includes having access to funding and being aware of the new financing avenues on the market, such as crowdfunding platforms, peer-to-peer lending, impact investment, blended finance, and so on. Mentorship programs that connect experienced entrepreneurs with emerging talent through collaborative platforms can also play an important role and provide invaluable guidance and support. So embracing collaboration is key for growth, and fostering collaborative ecosystem that supports entrepreneurial ventures is becoming an integral part of every modern city. So by providing vibrant environments such as co-working spaces, incubators, access to funding, cities can attract and nurture businesses, encourage collaboration and knowledge sharing. This multi-stakeholder approach involving governments, including local municipalities, investors, academia, and the private sector, helps create an entrepreneurial ecosystem that drives urban development and also positions cities as hubs of innovation and opportunity. And before I finish, I would like to share with our listeners that UNCTAD is also organizing the World Investment Forum in Abu Dhabi from 16th to 20th October this year. This is a global platform for policymakers, business leaders, and industry experts to discuss issues and opportunities under the topic of investing in sustainable development. We plan to build upon our conversation today at the forum and feeds key ideas and findings into the session on entrepreneurship and urban development in order to integrate sustainable development insights and policy advice into investment discussions and decisions. This will be to inform and shape investment strategy at global, local, and national levels and promote sustainable investment practices that align with the global goals. And now Massimo from Alter Contacts will take over from here. And I invite you all to take part in the roundtable discussion with 4 entrepreneurs who are changing the urban game.
Thank you, Zaria, for the highlights on this report. I would like to invite everybody to read it. By the way, it's online. It's extremely insightful, and it has fantastic references to real cases. Very insightful indeed. As previously mentioned, feel free to write your questions or comments in the Q&A section of the Zoom meeting. And now, without further ado, we start the conversation with Richard Comlan-Foley from Lomé in Togo. He is the founder of the African Geospace. He's using satellite data to understand down-to-earth problems. So, good afternoon, Richard. Please tell us, which urban issues did you identify in Togo, and how is your business addressing them?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Massimo, for the question. I would like to start by saying that yesterday in Lomé, there was a huge rain. And one strange thing was that the roads and the areas which are not usually flooded when it's rain were all under the flows yesterday. So this means that Togo faces many challenges related to urban planning and infrastructure development, including inadequate transportation systems, limited access to basic services such as water or sanitation, but also poor planned urban expansion. So how do we solve or contributing with solution to those issues? To address them, we use satellite data to assist in urban planning and infrastructure development. By analyzing those data, we provide insight into optimal locations, for example, for infrastructure development or infrastructure projects, transportation networks, distribution of essential services, to name a few of the services that we support. And by doing that, we enable more efficient and sustainable cities. Furthermore, during the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, we supported the government and had the privilege to contribute to the national COVID-19 response plan. We use GIS, but also the pandemic-related data to design a dynamic dashboard to track the evolution of the pandemic. And decision makers were able to use the platform to plan action, but also citizens to understand the ongoing effects of the pandemic. So I can say those are a few of things we are doing to provide solution at the city level. Thank you.
Honorable, thank you very much. Quite impressive, yeah, to have the real time and having the big picture. I see there's a hand raised. We're gonna keep it, please, for the Q&A part, because first we do the first round of the first question to each one. Let's move to another time zone. We have Lenise NG from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, who is the founder of Drupi, as a business-to-business e-commerce platform that supports business trade across the Southeast Asia region. So good evening for you, Lenise. Please tell us in brief about Drupi and its solution on how your business is addressing Southeast Asia's urban expansion.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Massimo. And really excited to be here among such amazing speakers and individuals. So in short, Drupi, we are an online wholesale platform that we provide digital tools and a marketplace for businesses across Southeast Asia to buy and sell in bulk easily. So we're currently operating across the region within 3 countries, so Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. And today, there are approximately 70 million micro and small businesses across Southeast Asia, and majority of them are currently residing in 2nd and 3rd tier cities. Also, just basing off on a United Nations Economic and Social Commission report, half of Asia Pacific's urban population currently reside in these areas. So it just basically means that Tier 2 cities and below will account for a huge share of urban growth in this region's developing economies. So what we're currently doing as a platform is that we've currently facilitated more than 200,000 businesses in this region to trade amongst each other and go beyond borderless. And our goal is to hopefully enable these businesses to trade in a cheaper and effective manner in hopes that this would generate more income and revenue to its respective local economies.
Wow. Every time I hear one of the news stories from each entrepreneur, I'm always like jaw dropped. Let's move fast from the Asia Pacific now to the Middle East, and then we might get back to you as well. With Hala Al-Namani. And Hala is in Beirut, Lebanon. She's the co-founder of Paltic, a social enterprise that is turning plastic waste into new products. So tell us, Hala, what urban conditions prompted you to start this business? And how is your business addressing the issues?
Thank you, Massimo. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. So Paltic's journey actually started in Africa, where we did a 3-month program in the year of 2019, and we got inspired by how they deal with waste. So what they do is that they turn their plastic waste into eco-bricks, which they use for benches and households within the cities and villages. And as the world produces more than 380 million tons of plastic waste every year, and recycling rates are still very low in our countries, we decided to take on a challenge and make an impact through finding long-term and innovative solutions for plastic waste. Lebanon is one of the many countries that's been facing waste problems since the year 2015. And that's where we wanted to find a solution to not only contribute to the environment, but also promote sustainable building materials and cities. This is when we began doing our research and found that plastic is a long-lasting and strong compound, which through it we can create durable and aesthetic materials used for interior design and architecture. Our material can then replace the use of wood, marble, and terrazzo, which are materials that come as new raw materials from quarries and trees. We eliminate the cut down of these materials and use recycled ones instead. We've been working alongside interior designers and architects to promote such an array of products that communities can grow to then use in their societies. I myself come from an interior architecture background, so the passion I have to grow within the sector is a mission that we drive at Paltic to fulfill every day.
Wonderful, thank you very much. And just to finish the first round, now we travel to a different latitude. We travel south to Kisumu in Kenya, where Jacqueline Awino Ochiel is the founder of the Reharvested Plus. I'll let her speak about how her health research is turning urban issues. She has identified 3 key issues, and this research is becoming sustainable urban entrepreneurship. So Jacqueline, I leave the floor to you.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. And thanks you for making me be part of this incredible group of people. So Reharvested Plus is an organization that aims to leverage incidences of malnutrition using food that would otherwise have gone into landfills. So basically, we realized during our research, there's a lot of food that goes into landfills, especially within the urban areas. But on the other aspect of it, within the rural areas, there are children who were malnourished, and there were some were wasted and are not even able to go to school because of that situation. So due to that, we are looking for a way in which we can be able to save this food from going into landfills and to help reduce incidences of malnutrition that was rampant within the rural areas. So one of our intervention is food redistribution. So basically what we do is we work with businesses that do retail businesses that have fruits and vegetables, and we purchase food from them at subsidized prices before this food goes bad. And we're able to use this food to go to the orphanages and places where the incidences of malnutrition are high. Specifically, we have children's homes, and we have the early childhood learning centers. So those are our main businesses. So, and the other intervention is we do food fortification. So there's food-to-food fortification, where we blend different fruits to buffer the nutrient contents of this food to ensure that children that are wasted are able to build up their nutritional levels and they're able to finally resume school. And then the other thing we do is food preservation, especially for businesses where they end up wasting food mainly because of the storage system that is not efficient. So we're working on a way that we can be able to ensure that these businesses are also able to preserve food, and therefore they're not making losses, with the main goal of reducing food that is going into landfills from going to landfills, and also saving on incidences of malnutrition.
That was quite fast and a lot of information, and I'm sure we'll have a chance with the questions to get to understand a little bit about this. I'm going to insert immediately some of the questions from the audience, because I see there's a question from Lenise and another question from Richard. So let's pick up already the question for Richard. And Alessandra Gatti is asking if you can share your vision of how satellite technology can revolutionize urban planning, infrastructure management, or other aspects of urban lives in the years to come. It's pretty similar to the question I was going to ask.
Okay, thank you, Massimo, for sharing the question, and thank you to Alessandra for asking. So our vision about revolutionizing urban planning using satellite technology is that, you know, urban planning has a huge spatial modeling aspect. And if you want to do that the right way, you have to go beyond using just geographical data first. I mean, positions that, or data that can be collected on the ground with GPS, for example. But then if you want to go further, you have to couple and combine those data with satellite data. So then you can have an holistic understanding of what's going on the ground. So if you have that understanding now, you can decide and plan which action to take and where, because don't forget, satellite data is also about localizing the right sites for the right project. You don't go around implementing projects just because you want, but you want to base the implementation of your project on real data and what's going on the ground. So we even trying to go in beyond that by association satellite data with AI algorithm to be more effective when it's come to choose a solution among a number of solutions available to be more efficient. So that's what I can say, Alessandra. Thank you.
All right, very good. I saw another question. I thought Dieter had his hand up a moment ago. Dieter Zimbauer. Did you raise your hand during the talk?
Sorry, that was accidental.
Oh, okay. Well, that's all right. Then I'm going to move to the question that we had for Lenise. There was a question related to, can you please talk how you see that DRP will evolve in the future and continue in the urban development? I would add to this the possibility of, or the aspect of inclusive connectivity, and how your business can actually melt, or let's say dilute, the inequality that exists on the digital aspect between rural and urban areas.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there, but fantastic questions. So I think just to give a little bit of like high level metric numbers, as of today, our platform has facilitated over $2 billion of transactions by just empowering these local businesses to trade beyond borders. So in the past, a lot of these local businesses are able to just buy and sell within the regions or the communities that they operate, but just by listing their products online. Now they're able to actually transact just beyond borders, not only within their cities, it could be intercities, cross states, and even international as well, in a very cheap and efficient manner. But based on our experience, just providing a platform itself doesn't work if it's not paired with programs to upskill these local businesses on how to sell better online. So we actually work together with various local governments and business communities to host multiple training programs on how do you improve your digital marketing skills, how do you actually list your products online, and all these little nuances that help them have more visibility and essentially assist them to sell more across different parts of the region. But on top of that, so we talked about having a platform and now having the right programs, but as a typical business, if you do not have enough cash flow, it will be extremely painful for you to grow your business. So because we understood that, and COVID-19 has really hit and affected a lot of micro and small businesses across the region. So what we did was we effectively went and partnered with a lot of various commercial and development banks. So commercial banks like Standard Chartered, UOB, Citibank, development banks like Agrobank. And we raised close to $200 million to immediately provide these financing access to 200,000 and even more micro and small businesses on our platform. So they could easily get working capital and invoice financing to really grow and their business. So we hope essentially that providing these three things are able to turbocharge and effectively increase the income and across the income gap, to bridge the income gap across rural and urban cities and population. So I hope that answers your question, Massimo, because I think that was also the second part on how do we create better bridging infrastructures and inclusivity. So I think it doesn't come without growing revenue and income streams across individuals and different local communities and cities as well.
Yeah. Indeed, it comes from them, and thank you, by the way. Sorry for putting it so complex and so adding double dimensions to a single question, but indeed, it doesn't stop there. And maybe the next question is for Hala, because Hala is approaching, and I like the word turbocharging, is approaching the problem, because from another aspect yet on top, because her enterprise is almost a social movement. So Hala, tell us about the programs you're doing to empower women and civil society, because you're doing something very interesting there.
Thank you, Massimo. So the second part of what we do as Paltic was actually born during COVID, because we weren't able to operate our machinery so much because we were locked in the houses. We created a curriculum about waste management and upcycling that targets women and children who specifically live in underprivileged areas. So one of Paltic's main pillars is not only to create products out of recycled waste, but to also teach the knowledge that we had learned ourselves during the process of building our social enterprise. So I'm very happy to say that during last year, we targeted more than 120 women who come from underprivileged areas running from the north to the south of Lebanon, where they now currently got job opportunities in recycling factories. They are teaching their communities about upcycling and recycling. They've enhanced their creativity on creating products from the waste they generate at home that they can actually reuse or they can sell as a form of income. This has helped immensely around 80% of these women as they are held responsible for the household finances every month. And just like my co-founder and myself have faced during the course of building Paltic, they have gotten a lot of flashback and comments about working and learning a very male-dominant industry department. However, they've proven to keep on moving forward, to keep inspiring their communities and to grow this knowledge within not only their villages, but the cities, countries, and hopefully neighboring areas as well.
Well, thank you very much. A very loable endeavor and very important, right? So this also speaks about community development. This also speaks about multi-stakeholder collaboration. And well, let's hear a little bit from Jacqueline. What are the opportunities and challenges that you have found in the collaboration with, for example, the private sector or the public sector? Because you are uniting rural and urban in your new supply chain that you invented. So please tell us a little bit about what are the aspects that you consider important that need to be further developed?
Okay, thank you so much, Massimo. So some of the challenges that we have realized so far has to be in the part of collaboration, because like we have to deal with the businesses that some have like complex supply chain and they have a lot of management issues. So we have to be able to come into agreement with these businesses. It's usually a long, tedious process with so many meetings. Sometimes you have to travel to the head offices to be able to strike an agreement with them. Other instances, we have to like go through so many back and forth calls to be successful with them signing an agreement with us. So though it's tedious and all, but we have been successful in some and some are not quite successful. Another challenge that we are going through is because you're connecting the urban and the rural side, it has to do with transportation and also being that you are transporting food. So there's a lot of challenges to be able to help make this food reach to the places that they need to be within the required time. And also the way the orphanages are distributed, it's not like in one place. So we currently use motorbikes because that is the most efficient way to go about it. But we're looking for like something that will be more sustainable and efficient, even as we grow our database to reach out to more other organizations.
Quite a busy business, right? And quite complex. And talking about complexities, and I see another comment from Alessandra Gatti, which boils to another point that indeed we wanted to touch. And well, I'm going back to Richard, because having data and having information, also as we heard from the very first presenter, from the very first subject matter expert of the part of the session from YACA, having data at that high level gives you the power to influence both the private and the public sectors. So what kind of resistance or obstacles have you found?
Yeah, thank you, Massimo. So the obstacles that we face are mainly at two levels. And the first one being the fact that when we started this company, we were at that time the very first space company in the country. So when we're talking about things like space exploration, satellite technology, people will ask back questions like, why are you talking about those high-level technology stuffs while people have simple issues to solve, like the hunger, like the pandemic or such stuff? And we were like, oh, okay, maybe they don't understand the real importance or the real value added, the added value of what we're doing. So one strategy we put in place was to collaborate with NASA through a grant from the United States Department. So we bring colleagues from NASA to Togo to train public, private, and academia on how to leverage satellite data, for example, to monitor agriculture, to monitor forests, and even to deal with water-related issues. I just talked about the flood that we have in Lomé yesterday, for example. And so when we bring those stakeholders, and beginning from that time, there was this openness. We have more stakeholders engaging with us from the UN system, from governments, from even private businesses. So I think it's important to let them know the added value of what we are doing. We are not just talking about space, but those space-based solutions are valuable for the issues like to solve issues like hunger, like natural disasters. So the second one being related to digital infrastructures. This is not direct resistance from the ground, but when you want to process high quality satellite data, you have to have the right infrastructure in place. So we don't have data at the right data centers in Togo, for example, to host data, stuff like that. So we turn to global providers like Google, which provide a very interesting platform for us to develop and scale our product and services. So I can say that those one are the two challenges, the main one we face, and how we solve them. Thank you.
Yeah, it was also a difficult question to answer because it's a lot of stuff, right? In such a short time, I had the feeling that each one of you actually could give a complete hour session for a complete interview. I wonder if there are questions also from the other presenters or the other panelists or someone else. I saw a couple of them passed today. Okay, Hamish Goldie. Okay, so please ask the question.
Well, one quick question. It's for Richard and for Hala. As an engineer, I'm very well aware of the link between plastic waste and flooding, because if the plastic waste is left unmanaged, it results in flooding. So Richard, have you looked at analyzing that to see the correlation, because that could lead to a policy change in terms of the use of that management of the waste?
Thank you, Amish. So we generally work around natural disasters, including flooding, for example. But the aspect of linking it to plastic waste, we don't work in that way before. But as you ask the question, I think I have to work with Halal to see how we can collaborate, and she will bring her domain knowledge and I will bring mine to see how we can put in place solutions that will benefit both our cities. So I think we have to.
Yeah, and indeed, one of the goals is precisely partnership. So Hala, what do you think?
I completely agree with Richard. I mean, plastic waste doesn't only come from flooding. Lebanon, we have plastic waste because people just tend to throw their waste on the streets, and it's just increasing every day. And we don't need a flood in order to walk down the streets and see all the waste left, right, and center. That's why recycling facilities are increasing in Lebanon, because you find INGOs and NGOs doing waste cleanups, beaches, on the streets. Households are now have an awareness about how to recycle, how to segregate different material. So it's not just about having a flood in order to solve this problem. It should definitely start from our houses, and then startups and companies such as yourself and myself working hand in hand to solve this problem. So no, I definitely agree that this would be a perfect partnership.
I've seen also that you actually involved the society into designing solutions to use the plastic that you recycle. While in other value chain or supply chains that we are building, like for example, where Jacqueline is applying and but she's building a complete new food supply chain, it is a lot about having the right stakeholders accepting the participation, for example, and convincing. Jacqueline, could you tell us something about some part of one of the successes that you remember well, and or something that made you proud of the last time? Because I know you had to pivot quite a lot to solve the multiple problems.
Yes, so one of our successful moments that is outstanding be the success stories that we get, especially from the children that we handle. So most of these orphanages, when we go there, we get children that are wasted, their malnutrition status is so bad, wasted, and they're not even able to go to school. So we work with them through this process, and they're able, so when we go back, their caretaker tells you that now this one is able to go to school. And even the caretaker is telling me so well that most people come to visit them during festive season and bring them candies and all this junk food, but then they really appreciate the fact that we give them vegetables, things that they really need. We give them fruits, things that is what they need, and we bring them. It's not like we bring them for an occasion to celebrate like a festive season, but we're making it something that is efficient for them. So that is a success story that make us to be able to keep pushing to ensure that this is something that is actualized and we make it as sustainable as possible. And also on the other aspect of it, the businesses that you work with, most of them being women, some of them will tell you that right now with you coming in, we're able to make better profits because like we throw less food. Like less of our food goes into like, so we are able to maximize on profits because most of these price costs increase because of the big supply chain wanting to make more profits. So there's a lot of inflation in prices and stuff. So these are some of the things that were affecting them. And with us coming in, they're able to admit that they're seeing changes. So that is what is pushing us and makes us going as an organization. Thank you, Massimo.
Wonderful, wonderful. You're creating really a radical change there because you are not only saving value for several stakeholders, but creating new. Now, I would like to open to a little bit more wider audience, the Q&A, because we had some questions also for the initial presenters and in general for the panelists. The floor is open. If anybody has a question, please come forward. All right. Dieter, now is not a mistake, right?
No, this was on purpose. And just to pick up on one question that was in the chat before about can you recover stolen assets that have been stolen through corrupt means? It was like one of the first questions in this chat, and I just wanted to say there are a lot of collective action initiatives out there that try to respond to that challenge, right? There is the Stolen Asset Recovery Initiative. It's like a collaboration between UNODC and the World Bank. There is the Basel Institute of Governance that has a program on asset recovery, and there's a lot of development of tools, legal assistance and training, helping countries to recover stolen assets that may or may not have been, for example, invested in urban real estate in the global north, and to try to get that money back into the public budgets of those countries.
The global north, yeah, we have the global north and the global south. I've seen quite a bit coming back and forth in different places where we have representatives from the north and the south. Does anybody want to add on this topic and how the dynamics are happening now? I guess probably Lenise has some info about how the global south is developing further, because you're really a catalyst now for the economy in Southeast Asia.
Could you repeat the question? So
how do you see in your specific case, which is e-commerce, as a catalyst for the socioeconomic development in Southeast Asia?
So as mentioned a little bit, I touched on a little bit just now, majority of the cities across this region are still considered as the second and third tier cities. And in terms of urban population living, at least 51% of the total populations are living within these areas, which means in turn that there is a lot more room to expand and grow by enhancing more economic value and income within these areas. So using digital tools, plugging these businesses online, not only just relying on offline channels, will turbocharge their business into actually propelling them to actually gain more revenue and speed up its growth in economical value within their communities.
All right, great. And well, let's go back into the zoom out, because I see there keep coming some questions for Richard. I don't know, Richard, if you're following the Q&A thread. There's a couple of questions there at the end for you. But in general, I think it would be along the lines that how do you think that you could create a thriving urban business ecosystem, for example, or further develop, or what are probably possibilities that you see to further develop the region?
So, okay, thank you for that question. And for me, I think it is very important to, let's say, to have a holistic approach when it comes to the development of a business ecosystem in Togo or even in the region. And there are a few factors that we can consider. So the first one that I want to talk about is the economical opportunities. By understanding the existing economic activity in a given region and the potential growth sectors, policymakers and investors can target specific industries for development, right? So we can talk about sectors such as technology, renewable energy, agriculture, tourism, the green tech, and climate-friendly business sectors. But this also means that we have to adopt or to try to disrupt the urban business to adopt a more data-driven approach, which is called city as service, where data and technology are the center of the solution that are provided to the citizens. But also cities as service approach have collaboration between policymakers, governments, businesses, but also the residents. So the second consideration is about infrastructure development. It's important to assess the existing infrastructure and identifying the gap that exists. So that will help, for example, like I said before, if you want to implement a project, where do I implement the project? How do I select the site, the right site for my project? Whether depending on the nature of that project, right? So it's important if you are doing roads, you want to build ports or develop telecommunication infrastructure, it's very important to choose the right site. Even renewable energy, for example, you can use satellite data to forecast the potential of a site to generate a given level of solar energy, for example. And the last one is to consider the environmental aspects. We cannot talk about business development today just by talking about economy and technology. No, we have to really encourage green and climate-friendly business while making economical progress. We also ensure that we minimize and mitigate environmental risk. So, yeah.
Well, thanks a lot. Just open floor if there is one last comment, probably from some of the previous presenters that also touched on government, on policy making, on use of satellite and development. And so if anyone wants to give a final comment, or maybe from UNCTAD or UN Habitat, open floor.
Massimo, I'm afraid we're coming to the end of the discussion. We have only 2 more minutes. Thank you very much for taking over and leading this question and answer session. I think it was very interesting to also show that how we have to bring the SDGs to all the stakeholders, how to link the different levels, how to produce a comprehensive approach. And that's very close to how we fight corruption, involving everybody with something at stake. I would just, going back to the cities initiative, which was so fascinating. Thank you very much. By the way, thank you very much to all the presenters. It was a really, really content-oriented and full session. And I hope that the close to 100 participants will really have taken something away. Dieter, you just raised an issue which gives me always pain, asset recovery. 18 years after entry into force of UNCTAD, 13 years after the STAR initiative you mentioned, we've only recovered 1% of the assets that we have in mind. So here we haven't done well here. So here we really have to proceed and build a better understanding of how international cooperation has to work, how information exchange has to work. What do we do with the assets once they have been identified and frozen in national economic cycles? How does mutual legal assistance work? So all of these things, we don't even know which steps are necessary to set processes into motion. So this is an example, this very politically so relevant 6th chapter of UNCTAD, of UNCAC, shows us how far away we are from where we need to get. So this is very revealing. Anyway, I just wanted to mention a small initiative we are running, returning cities, and also involving local government. We have started 2 years ago, and we introduced this last year at the COSP in Sharm el-Sheikh, our global network of anti-corruption cities, working with the mayor of Cartagena in Colombia, who has cleaned his city of corruption in 2 years. So we are making available best practices, encouraging mayors all over the world to also think mainstreaming anti-corruption content into urban and local politics strategies. I think it's very important to close the gap between the up and the down, to bring everybody together so that we can really fight corruption successfully, to raise the money, the integrity dividend for the financing of the SDGs. Thank you very much. I think we've run out of time. Thank you for your participation. It was really enlightening, stimulating. It was a pleasure to co-chair with Massimo. Massimo, we haven't met. It's great that we meet now. All the best to all of you in your most inspiring endeavors. I wish you well. It's our task, our responsibility, SDG implementation. All the best. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much to everyone for today. Thank you.
Thank you.